welcome to The Skinny for Friday, September 26th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague Ray Roa, the editor-in-chief with Creative Loafing newspaper. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Mitch. How's it going today?
Hey, so today is the year anniversary of Hurricane Helene.
Crazy.
Sad times, definitely. And luckily, nothing crazy going on in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, we're knocking on wood for that.
Right. And so, anyway, just good to see you. I know the Creative Loafing, your Best of the Bay
is on there, so half of my brain is free to think about memes and all that stuff again.
Well, we've got a couple great guests today. Later on the program, we're going to have Nadine Strawson, the former president of the ACLU, on. Of course, so much going on with people now, thinking about the First Amendment and free speech and all of that, what's happened in the last few weeks here in America. And so please stay tuned for that. But first, we're going to start up with Dr. Scott Rivkees. He, of course, was the former Surgeon General and Secretary of Health in Florida here from June of 2019 to September of 2021. He's worked with the National Institutes of Health and the U.S. FDA on drug safety issues. He currently is the Professor of Practice, Acting Associate Dean of Education, and Vice Chair of Health Service Policy and Practice in the School of Public Health at Brown University, and he joins us here on The Skinny. Good morning, Dr. Rivkees.
Good morning, Mitch and Ray.
Morning. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get to it, Scott, because we wanted to talk to you because you wrote published an op-ed. Of course, this is all about what we've heard here in Florida regarding a potential ban of vaccine mandates, which is Dr. Joseph Ladapo, of course, said in a press conference in Hillsborough County a few weeks ago. And you, Dr. Rivkees, wrote an op-ed that was published last week in the Tampa Bay Times, where you said that banning vaccines is worrisome not only to Floridians, but it has implications beyond Florida. And can you talk more about that?
Yeah, first, what we're seeing, Mitch, is really a predetermined ideology that is not based on science. And we know that for individuals to be protected, vaccines have prevented hundreds of millions of deaths. And that for vaccination to work, you need two things to happen. First, parents need to vaccinate their children, but also because some individuals' vaccines are not 100% effective, people are immunocompromised, people with cancer are also dependent on other people vaccinating their children so that we have population safety. And what we're seeing is that we're already seeing declines in vaccination rates in Florida. And if you take away these required vaccines, it will fall further to the point that some communities are going to be very at risk for vaccine-preventable serious illnesses.
Dr. Ladapo, he was on CNN's State of the Union a couple of days after they made this announcement, him and Governor DeSantis here in Tampa. And he was asked by CNN's Jake Tapper if his department had done any data analysis or projections on how the change could affect outbreaks of diseases like measles, polio, or whooping cough. And he said no, and he just brushed the question off. I mean, that was a pretty legitimate question, was it not?
Yeah, I mean, certainly, the Department of Health in Florida is a terrific institution, with lots of expertise. They certainly can do these projections. And actually, even 2 months earlier, a group in Stanford had done these projections where they showed that vaccination rates focusing on measles dropped by just 10%. Over the next 2 decades, we'd see more than 10 million cases of measles in the U.S. and, probably about 1 million cases in Florida. And measles is a very serious disease with a mortality rate of 1%. So you could actually have 1,000 children who would succumb to this illness. So these are not trivial illnesses that we are dealing with, and there can be real harm by reducing vaccination requirements.
We're talking to Dr. Scott Rivkees. He was, of course, the former Florida Surgeon General from 2019 to 2021. Dr. Rivkees, Dr. Ladapo, he has said that the state is emphasizing, should I ask you that, do you think that the state is emphasizing politics more than science when they say this is simply all about parental rights? Because that's something that we're hearing, basically. We're letting the parents make the decision here and empowering them.
Yeah, first of all, this has nothing to do with parental rights. This is part of an organized strategy to undermine vaccination in Florida. This is a string of different policies and statements that he has made to undermine vaccination. As far as this notion about personal freedom, I get that. But on the other hand, this is, when we can talk about personal freedom for one group of individuals who actually will impinge on the personal freedom of other individuals. If we don't have enough population protection, which means vaccinating children, individuals who may be immunocompromised, people who are treated with cancer, people who are older, they're actually going to have their rights and liberties trampled on by not being able to go out in public when outbreaks occur.
Despite the public opprobrium, Ladapo has been doubling down. He recently appeared on a podcast where he said that while mandates would be rolled back, accessibility to vaccines would remain unless they are mRNA vaccines. He said no one should be using that one. Give us your thoughts about that. That has been something that, of course, since COVID, there's been a prevailing thought from Senate Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and others, something that's, mRNA vaccines or something to be concerned about. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, first of all, this has been something that's been looked at extensively. There have been just under 1 billion doses of the mRNA vaccines that have been given in the United States. They have an incredibly effective safety profile. The notion that they get into the human genome, affect our genes, is absolutely not true. So these are vaccines that are safe, they're effective. During the pandemic, estimated to have saved anywhere between 2 and 3 million lives. As far as the notion that other vaccines will remain available, that is correct. But what happens is without the push, without the requirement for children going into school to be vaccinated, we're going to see falling rates, and this is going to have consequences on the community when we start having pockets of outbreaks in under-vaccinated areas.
Dr. Rifkes, I want to, if I could, just pivot to what's going on in Washington, D.C. under, as I mentioned a moment ago, RFK Jr., Health and Human Services. We heard things, we're hearing what they might attribute to autism, right? President Trump had this press conference on Monday where he announced that pregnant women should dramatically limit their use of acetaminophen, known by the brand name Tylenol, because he claimed it raised the risk of autism. And many say this claim is not supported by science. Research into links between acetaminophen use during pregnancy and autism have not proved a causal relationship. While medical experts widely agree that growing diagnosis of autism cannot be traced back to a singular cause. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so first of all, diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder has gone up because this is something we're focusing on. And as it's going up, actually, Tylenol use has actually fallen over the past 15 to 20 years. So the epidemiology don't support this notion. One of the things I'm also really concerned about is what are the alternatives? So for example, last year, Dr. Ladapo said nobody should have mRNA vaccines, but didn't propose any alternatives for people. What are they going to do instead? So we know that fevers during pregnancy are difficult and have adverse effects on pregnancy and also on the fetus. So what are they going to propose instead? The notion that pregnant women should just tough it out. Well, that is wrong. There will be harm to mothers and there'll be harms to fetuses as a result. And then again, you're seeing the medical community come out overwhelmingly against these statements because knowing the facts, there is no cause and effect relationship.
Dr. Rifkes, as we circle back to Florida here, in our last question for you, and that is, of course, the Florida legislature is going to have a say-so on this because some of these are in statute, vaccine mandates that we have right now for children, certainly. And so that is something the lawmakers are going to have to vote on when they reconvene in Tallahassee in January. I've been seeing polls around the country and certainly here in Florida that show a majority of Floridians, certainly a majority of Republicans even, are not supportive of this. What do you think is going to happen here when the legislature convenes in January? Obviously, you think people need to reach out to their lawmakers if they're concerned about what they're hearing from Dr. Ladapo.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are two things at play here. First, as Surgeon General, he can have rules that go into effect that will take out the vaccines that are currently required, some of them, from being requirements. This includes varicella. Before we had the varicella vaccine, there were 4 million cases of chickenpox chickenpox year. The first patient I saw as a new intern up in Boston was a 4-year-old boy who had varicella encephalitis, who was left permanently injured with that. So he can do some things with rule. He could even, by rule, he can require that the doses of vaccines for the ones approved by statute be brought down to minuscule, ineffective levels. So this rulemaking authority rests with the Surgeon General and also with the governor's office. So we have to be concerned about that. And then as far as legislation to overturn the requirements for measles, mumps, rubella, DPT, and polio, that is something that will have to be voted on. But again, by rulemaking authority, which can go in effect within 90 days, he can take away the requirements for these other vaccines, and then he can also change the dose requirements for the ones that are in law to bring them down to points where they end up being not effective.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Dr. Scott Rivkees is a professor of practice, acting associate dean of education. Oh, I'm sorry, Ray. You want to get one question?
I want to ask you, when you were appointed by this governor in 2019, he was really up on your wealth of experience. He was looking to you to help with the medical marijuana initiatives. How much can you comment about, where the governor's at right now and what it's like for you to kind of watch this from the sideline?
There was a major, good question, Ray. There was a major pivot during by Governor DeSantis about halfway through the pandemic. Governor DeSantis, went all over the state, embraced COVID vaccines. And in fact, we should really be proud of the fact that going into mid-spring of 2021, Florida had among the highest vaccination rates against COVID-19 and had among the lowest death rates per capita in the country. And then we went to a situation where all of a sudden he stopped supporting vaccines, vaccination rates fell, and then when the Delta wave hit in the summer of 21, Florida went from having among the best vaccination rates and lowest mortality rates to among the worst. And so we see the painful consequences of changes in these policies. And being a pediatrician, having seen severe cases of childhood meningitis, chickenpox, hepatitis B, it breaks my heart that, again, we can be reliving these horrible diseases that cause so much harm to children and are vaccine preventable.
Thanks, Doctor.
Yes, Dr. Scott Rivkees. Again, he's the Acting Associate Dean of Education and Vice Chair of Health Service Policy and Practice in the School of Public Health at Brown University. Dr. Rivkees, thank you so much for your time appearing here on the Skinning here on WMNF.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And now we're going to pivot and talk about all things under the First Amendment. And joining us right now, also via Zoom, is Nadine Strossen, who is the professor emerita at New York Law School and senior fellow at FIRE, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights, and is probably best known for being the former president of the American Civil Liberties Union from 1991 to 2008. Nadine Strossen, good morning.
I'm delighted to be here, and I really enjoyed listening to you, Scott. Well, enjoyed is the wrong verb. I was very disturbed by what you were reporting on, but thank you for your conscientious ongoing commitment.
Absolutely, yes. And we're so appreciative of having you here on the airwaves here on MNF, Nadine Strossen. Obviously, so much Americans, something that you do for a living, right, and have for much of your career talking about the First Amendment is so much in the spotlight right now after what happened with comedian Jimmy Kimmel in the last couple of weeks being, at least for a few days, taken off the air after FCC Chairman Brendan Carr told Betty Johnson, a conservative podcaster, that ABC/Disney should hold him accountable or face punishment after his remarks, jokes, call what you will, about right-wing influencer Charlie Kirk after he was assassinated a couple weeks ago. And so there's a lot to unpack here, Nadine Strossen, but I think most of our listeners are aware of what's been happening with that. And of course, Jimmy Kimmel is back on the airwaves now. There are still concerns. We know there's all these ABC affiliate stations are not putting him on the air now. This FCC thing, though, right, with Brendan Carr has really seemed to alarm a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle because we really haven't really seen that happen with these. And I know, of course, they're public licenses, these television networks. Give us your thoughts where we're at right now with this whole Kimmel situation.
It is a shocking violation of the most fundamental First Amendment rights, as well as the statute that created the FCC, which from the beginning in 1934 expressly said that the FCC would have no power to censor. It literally said that. This is the first time in history that the FCC has brazenly purported to exercise its asserted power to suppress speech solely because of political disagreement with the speech. And I might add that the very chair of the FCC, who is wielding that power, Brendan Carr, before he ascended to his position in the recent past, expressly reaffirmed that the FCC does not have any censorial power. That position was reaffirmed in a brief that was recently filed by an ideologically diverse number of former FCC commissioners, including chairmen, both Republicans and Democrats. So, and it really violates what the Supreme Court has repeatedly held. Again, justices all across the ideological spectrum, not a single dissent, that the bedrock principle of freedom of speech is viewpoint neutrality. The government must remain neutral with respect to the views, the ideas, the messages of the speech. In our democracy, where we, the people, wield sovereign power, and where we have free speech, it is especially important for us to be able to talk about, including critically, including comically, including satirically, about government officials, those that are seeking to represent us. So this is at once an attack on free speech and also democracy. And while I'm heartened that Kimmel is back on the air, we should, first of all, he's not on the air in about 25% of the country, where those who control the affiliate stations have decided that who knows what their motives are, but we do know that the corporate actors that control those particular affiliates have pending merger requests, or in one case, a pending request for a waiver from the FCC. So, of course, the FCC can wield its regulatory power as a lever to continue to suppress even Kimmel's speech for much of the United States. And Trump has expressly said that next on the chopping block are a couple other late night hosts whose views he also disagrees with. And by the way, I should say that your wonderful station, WMNF, and congratulations on the awards that you recently got, you and other formerly publicly funded media outlets are also feeling the chill, right? Because of disagreement with the views that are being suppressed. That is the reason why public funding has been cut off, as is being asserted in a lawsuit that has been brought by NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. So, we face challenging times, and I was very happy to make a contribution to WMNF when I was there recently. I think your work is wonderful, and hopefully others will step up to the plate, but in every possible way, through money and through raising our voices.
Well, we certainly thank you for that, Nadine Strawson. In fact, 2 weeks from today, we're going to be fundraising here on the Skinny here, so we'll use that as a pitch there. Nadine, so much to talk about again. Let's talk about the capitulation and stay on with Brendan Carr here for a moment, because I'm thinking to some of these, after Donald Trump came into office, right, we had these networks basically capitulate when it comes to these, Donald Trump sues a lot of folks, obviously. He sued CBS/Paramount earlier this year, or actually, I guess it was late last year, after this interview that he objected to on CBS's 60 Minutes with Kamala Harris about the editing of the interview. And in a similar vein, when he also sued ABC regarding George Stephanopoulos misspeaking regarding his situation in the E. Jean Carroll trial. In both cases, the network settled for $16 million each. And in the case of the CBS Paramount deal, there was a lot of concern there that Paramount was, paying a higher amount to settle the case so they can ensure the company's exposure to potential legal actions from its shareholders accusing of bribery. And of course, Paramount was ultimately sold, or about to be sold again. I don't know if it's completely done now, to Skydance. And Brendan Carr, going back to him, it said that the lawsuit was not linked to the FCC's review of the company's merger with Skydance Paramount Skydance and Paramount. But nevertheless, we're seeing this, and obviously, we could talk about this is happening in all other areas of our society in terms of academia and the like, paying off the president here for threats.
Law firms are another bad example.
Yeah, but like we're seeing this here now with these, news organizations, right? Who basically, everything I read said that both those cases, if they had gone to trial, there's a good chance that those TV news networks would have won, but nevertheless, they settled. And in the case again, CBS/Paramount, they had business deals going on there, and that's something that we're hearing when you talk about the Nexstar and the or Sinclair, right? But more Nexstar, I guess, right, being bought by the Tegna stations. So the big arm of federal government, maybe not exactly just deciding how this is going about, but seemingly having a large hand here in a way that we've never really seen before.
Yes. What we're seeing is the leveraging of regulatory power, including funding power, by the government to try to accomplish indirectly what it is clearly constitutionally prohibited from doing directly. So Trump could not directly say, Jimmy Kimmel, you are off the air. Likewise, Trump could not directly say to Columbia University, you may not teach certain courses, or you may not hire certain professors. But by using, and there are many, many other examples, including law firms, powerful law firms have also agreed that they are not going to represent certain clients and advocate certain causes. Worse yet, that they are going to advocate for certain causes that Donald Trump favors, becoming mouthpieces of the government. And they are doing this to ward off very serious, perhaps existential threats through lack of funding and lack, denial of whatever regulatory consequences being sought from the FCC. Now, this is as illegal as the more blatant direct censorship would be. Very, very clear. Just last year, the United States Supreme Court unanimously, every single justice, including those appointed by Donald Trump, ruled in a case that the ACLU brought, I'm proud to say, as the longtime president of the ACLU, in which the court said government may not indirectly achieve censorship that it may not directly achieve, including by acting through intermediaries. That was a case, and I want to tell you the facts of the case because the political vectors were exactly the opposite of what they are now. And one of the major challenges that we free speech advocates always face is that most people tend to focus only on, do I like this particular message? Do I like this particular speaker? And they don't get very hot and bothered if, they don't mind a particular speaker being suppressed. So this was a case that came from the Cuomo administration, Democratic gubernatorial administration in New York, that was very anti-NRA, National Rifle Association. Right. And the financial, somebody in the cabinet who had financial regulatory power over banks, insurance industry, companies, and so forth, told them basically that they should not do any business with the NRA, or else they would suffer adverse regulatory consequences. Again, the Supreme Court unanimously struck that down, and it is exactly the same tactic that is being used now, although by Republicans who object to more progressive messages that are being purveyed by the various institutions that are being attacked. So the point is, the lawsuits, including more recently a defamation lawsuit against the New York Times, is very clear that these tactics are all unconstitutional. If they were challenged in the court, they would be struck down. I feel completely confident in saying that the rulings to date across the board, including from Trump judges, have struck down the restrictions on law firms, struck down the restrictions on Harvard University, struck down the restrictions where people have challenged them. The problem is, understandably, I'm not going to castigate those who make a rational decision that, litigation is costly, litigation is slow, it's stressful. Meanwhile, our reputation is being harmed. So maybe it is the more prudent thing to do to settle. And what that means is that the First Amendment is not necessarily going to be enforced. And even when it is actually enforced, for every Harvard that is wealthy and powerful enough to fight it out in the courts, there are a zillion other broadcasters and lawyers and law firms and colleges and you name it, who don't have the resources and who are going to be and are enormously chilled, are just not saying anything that they fear could get them in this administration's crosshairs.
If you're just tuning in right now, that is the voice of Nadine Strossen, the longtime former ACLU head, national head of the ACLU. It is 32 minutes past the hour. I'm Mitch Perry along with Ray Roa. You're listening to Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. We do welcome your phone calls. The phone number to call in right now, 813-239-9663. We have Nadine Strossen here till noon here. So plenty to talk to you about, Nadine. By the way, before we get in further, because, and I do want to talk about what's happening to people who have been made critical comments about Charlie Kirk on social media and what's happening to them. But I love this comment because so much of this stuff is happening right now. It does seem, when it comes to the issue of free speech, and I know you know this so well, and that is, free speech is cool when it's something I agree with and something I don't, then it's not free speech. Greg Lukianoff, the president and chief executive of FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, he wrote a column in the New York Times this week, and it began. He wrote, if you're a free speech lawyer, you face a choice. Either expect to be disappointed by people of all political stripes or go crazy. I choose low expectations. And he says, again and again, political actors preach the importance of free speech only to reach for the censor's muzzle when it helps their side. If, like me, you defend free speech as a principle rather than invoke it opportunistically, you get distressingly accustomed to seeing the same people take opposite positions on an issue, sometimes within the space of just a few months. And we can get into that on all sides. But first, let's talk about what is happening in America with people who are getting fired, quite frankly, or in serious trouble because of comments they made on social media. Now, I think this is not current, but as of a week ago, the American Association of University Professors, the AAUP, which is, of course, they defend academic freedom, said that it was aware of retaliation against at least 60 professors and teachers in connection with critical comments they made about Charlie Kirk or people mourning him. And on Monday, Florida Education Commissioner Anastasios Kamatis recommended yanking a teacher's educator's credentials for his comments about Kirk's death. He said, quote, holding educators accountable for speech that celebrates violence in schools is not a violation of free speech. It is a necessary step to uphold the standards of the teaching profession and the safety of our schools. And he said he found probable cause on 4 education code violations. The teacher can forfeit her license, or she can be tried in front of the department's Education Practices Commission or the Department of Administrative Hearings. Your thoughts about all this?
Well, first, Mitch, Greg Lukianoff is a longtime friend and colleague of mine. I could not agree with him more. The vast majority of people in this country believe in free speech for me, but not for thee. And those of us who try to consistently, neutrally defend free speech have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that our supporters are always going to be transient. Now, that said, I always love to salute those people who do have the principle to stand up for freedom for speech, even that is contrary to their political beliefs. So with respect to Jimmy Kimmel, I want to salute Tucker Carlson. I was quite frankly, amazed that he so strongly objected to that because he's been such a strong Trump partisan. Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, I'm not so surprised because he's been a consistent libertarian. But I think for all of us who care deeply about free speech, it is especially important when we criticize our team politically when they're doing the wrong thing on free speech. But, so it was wonderful that Trump and conservatives for a long time were condemning advocacy that was coming from the left end of the political spectrum to censor what they considered hate speech, transphobic speech and Islamophobic speech and so forth. And they were also, the Republicans and conservatives, including Trump, were also critiquing cancel culture from the left, which has been a major factor on many college campuses, suppressing critical discussion about important issues, including COVID and elections. But what we've seen recently is the tables have completely turned, and we have the United States Attorney General expressly calling for using the prosecutorial power of the federal government against so-called hate speech. She walked it back a little, not enough. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is cheering her on and showing the problem with a concept of hate speech, which is inherently subjective, by saying, all these people are criticizing me. That's hate speech against me. And a cancel culture from the right in the situations that you've described of school teachers and university professors and many, many other people in all walks of life being subject to criticism and pressure on their employers to fire them. That is cancel culture from the right. And I actually heard Matt Walsh, a conservative commentator, say it expressly, what really is implicit in all these reverse switcheroo positions. He said, well, but cancel culture from the left was bad because they were, canceling good and true and important ideas. But, what we're doing should be called consequence culture because we're imposing consequences for evil and dangerous ideas. And I'm smiling because these are such inherently subjective concepts, which is precisely why the government has to remain neutral and let us debate it. Now, school teachers who work for public schools and faculty members who work for state universities are protected by the First Amendment. And that means that there are some professional limits on what they say in their professional capacity. If you're teaching a course about ancient history, you should not say anything about Charlie Kirk one way or the other because that is irrelevant to the topic that you are teaching. But the Supreme Court has held for many, many decades now that you do not forfeit your free speech rights as a citizen, as a member of the general community, to speak in a non-professional capacity on social media or a demonstration in a public park on your own time and so forth, that should not be a price that you have to pay. That you can only be a school teacher or a faculty member at the price of not being able to voice your views when you're off the clock, when you're not working in your professional capacity. And in fact, the Supreme Court has held that extramural speech, that is, outside the confines of your research and teaching capacities, is protected if you are addressing a matter of public concern, which talking about Charlie Kirk and his assassination, and these are pressing matters of public concern, that you can only be disciplined for that if the government, the school board or the university can show, and it has the burden of proof, that there is a substantial disruption of the educational process, and moreover, that negative impact specifically on the workplace outweighs the positive benefits of free speech. And the positive benefits of having public employees speak, the Supreme Court has stressed, is not only their own free speech rights, but the rights of all the rest of us, because the First Amendment protects our right to hear and to listen. And people who work for government entities may well well have insights and perspectives and information that is especially valuable for us to hear. And one other point here, Mitch, which is that the Supreme Court has long frowned on the concept of the so-called heckler's veto, that people who oppose the speaker cannot cause a disturbance or threaten violence or make complaints, cause a disruption, and therefore say, oh, well, the speech is being disruptive. No, it is you hecklers who are being disruptive, and we are not going to allow you to veto, in effect, the speaker. And so you have J.D. Vance and other political leaders are actually calling on people to try to ferret out and file complaints about statements that they don't like that teachers and so forth have made. And that cannot be manufactured into passing muster as a so-called substantial disruption. That is a heckler's veto. And fortunately, lower courts have been ruling favorably on these kinds of issues. So again, the fired or threatened or suspended public employees do have a strong First Amendment right. But I understand that many others, they may not have the wherewithal to take those claims to court. I mean, if Columbia University and Paul Weiss, a major law firm, and major networks can't fight Trump, I don't expect every school teacher,
Right.
in fact, member to be able to do that. So there's a profound chilling effect, even though there's no First Amendment legitimacy.
We're going to bring in a phone caller here for Nadine Strawson from the formerly from the ACLU. We've got Nancy from St. Petersburg. Hi, Nancy. You're on the Skinny.
Oh, hi. What a wonderful program. Thank you so much. And thank you very much, Ms. Strasser, for being there today. Yay. Okay. I just want to say that he certainly is keeping everybody's hands tied and divided. And, I mean, as far as lawsuits go, constantly with the lawsuits that have no basis, they should be what they used to call frivolous. And, they shouldn't even be able to make it to court at all. And I'm really surprised that they have been able to do this. But anyway, what I want to say is it keeps everybody busy, and even on the left, we are all divided because we all we respond to these different things that are happening constantly, and one on top of another, as though this administration is consulting their AI to find out what should be the next move. And it's all planned. Like this week, we're going to have Charlie Kirk. He's going to be assassinated. So we're going to do that to the left, and and it's a plus for the Christian nationalism movement. And this will go on and on and on. Anyway,
did you have a question at all, Nancy, or just want to make a comment?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do we fight this? Is it better that we just all say, hey, guess what? We totally agree with Trump. Go for it, mister. Just do it, And then he would have nobody to fight with.
All right. Thank you, Nancy.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for your excellent comments. And you are pointing to a problem, which is the constant barrage is perhaps having an effect of making people kind of tired, or, the shock value gets worn out. It becomes the new normal. You can't even keep track of everything that's happening. So when you say, what can we do? Your call is really illustrative of something that is incredibly important, and I never take for granted, which is continue to be aware of what is being done, continue to be angry about it, continue to raise your voice about it, and please continue to explain to anybody who will listen to you that the principles that are at stake here absolutely are equally important to everybody, left, right, and center. And even if you support Trump's policies, and by the way, I know many constitutional law professors who are ardent supporters of Trump's policies, who have nevertheless said we oppose the unconstitutional and illegal means that he is using to implement those policies. And so, information and education goes such a long way toward making changes. And even if, and having the courage to speak out, even if, let's say, you decide you don't have the resources to fight a case in court, it might be really important for you if you know about a school teacher or you hear about somebody who is being punished, to send them an email, to reach out to them, to counter the attacks that they're getting on social media that are orchestrated from the right. Speaking up does in fact make a difference. And thank you for doing it here and continuing to do it.
Nadine Strawson from the ACLU, formerly from the ACLU here on the WMNF. Nadine, you were in Tampa a few weeks ago speaking on behalf of the group 200 Muslim Women Who Care. I know the focus is on the Israeli-Palestinian situation, which has been just a tinderbox for decades, certainly when it comes to on college campuses. I remember I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area. Folks in Berkeley protested Bibi Netanyahu speaking at the University of California at Berkeley in 1997, I believe it was. This is a toxic issue. And these days, since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel has become so divisive in our country and on college campuses. What was the theme that you were talking about when you were in Tampa here a few weeks ago up at the USF campus?
Well, thank you so much for raising that, Mitch. And I really do appreciate the shout out to 200 Muslim Women Who Care and the founder and president of that organization, Dima Abu Olaim. They did a fabulous job in organizing a wonderful program, which was about free speech and academic freedom in general. And one of the ways that Dima organized that program, we kind of collaborated, was she brought together a number of people from your community, from the Tampa community, including somebody from WMNF. I'm looking for his name right now.
Chris Young, maybe.
Chris Young, who also got an award,
yes,
which is great. And each one of them had some experience of censorship, often related to the Israel-Palestine situation, but as I recall, not 100%. Because one spoke about voting rights. And what was wonderful was that I was then able to use their experiences as a base for talking about general First Amendment free speech principles. The Israel-Palestine situation has been an occasion for censorship of self-censorship and direct censorship from perspectives all across the spectrum on that issue. The Trump administration, but also the Biden administration before that, leveraged an important civil rights anti-discrimination law to unjustifiably suppress controversial expression about that issue. I'm talking about Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which does prohibit discrimination on the basis of national and other identities. So it does prohibit anti-Semitic, anti-Islamic, anti-Palestinian, etc. discrimination. But both administrations post-October 7th have enforced an unduly expansive concept of discrimination as extending to not only, literal physical attacks or physical exclusion or speech that's unprotected, such as a threat or incitement to violence, but they have also treated as discriminatory speech that allegedly conveys anti-Israeli or anti-Palestinian ideas. Again, deeply violating the viewpoint neutrality principle. But because accusations that schools have violated Title VI by not sufficiently suppressing alleged discrimination, the penalty for that is defunding. So again, here we have the weapon of federal regulation in the form of defunding being used against speech that is unpopular, and that has included, as I say, purportedly anti-Semitic and purportedly anti-Palestinian speech, and that is really exactly the opposite of what we want to occur on our college campuses, which is this is such an important issue of all places where we should have full-throated debates and discussions. It has to be on college campuses. If I can say one other thing, Mitch, just last week, FIRE released its latest comprehensive survey of the state of free speech on university campuses based on surveying 257 campuses, 70,000 students, working with College Pulse, the largest survey that's ever been done. And the number one issue where students all across the country say they cannot have a frank and candid conversation is Israel-Palestine. More than 50% of students say that. And on 21 campuses, 75% of students say that. And one other example, I live right around the corner from Barnard College, associated with Columbia University. At Barnard, an Ivy League school, 90% of students say they can't frankly discuss that issue. I mean, this is really a catastrophe in terms of understanding and quite frankly, ultimately peaceful resolution and support for a peaceful resolution of this longstanding conflict.
Nadine, you've been on a tour of sorts of the college campuses. You were just at USF early this month. I'm curious, you mentioned your conversations with these students and folks who are really tuned into what's going on and really care about the world around them. As you talk to them, can you give us a sense of how much they're willing to stick their neck out and jeopardize their careers and futures as they try to have frank conversations about tough things like this in the university setting?
And I don't have the pleasure of seeing you, but I believe this is Ray who is talking.
Yeah, that's right. I was supposed to come link up with you, but I had a previous obligation, so I couldn't come over there and attend the event with you.
Well, so nice to meet you now. And obviously, there is a great deal of variation, but I thank you for recognizing, Ray, that, we are even seeing tenured faculty members say that they do not dare speak up for fear of the adverse consequences, not only the extremely unpleasant consequences of being subject to shaming and shunning and canceling campaigns, social ostracism, that's bad enough, but pressure campaigns on their employers, including from government officials, from politicians, to punish them. We had a situation in Texas recently where a student complained about a faculty member saying something about transgender, and the student, clearly it was an ambush video that goes viral, and the university president, to his credit, initially said, well, I'm not going to fire this faculty member, but guess what? Some local state politicians in Texas put pressure on the president, and not only does the president fire the faculty member, but also the chair of the department and the dean of the whole school, and then resigned himself. So, if even people with that degree of economic and professional security feel threatened, as they should, because they're being punished anyway, it's not surprising that a student at the beginning of a career would engage in self-censorship. The adverse consequences are so enormous. And so to look at the glass half full, which I always do as an activist, I am constantly meeting students, including at the University of USF, where I recently spoke, who do speak up courageously, recognizing that there may well be adverse consequences, but being true to themselves and being true to the truth-seeking mission of the university and to ultimately to their responsibility and opportunity as citizens of this democratic society. And I've talked with many faculty members all over the country and actually all over the world, Ray and Mitch. These are issues of worldwide consequence. I mean, my interview right before you was with a Danish journalist, and right after you was going to be with a journalist from the Balkans, and on and on and on. And all of us talk about how can we help to nurture and instill the virtue of courage. You go back and you read the founders. We're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. And they really talked about courage and how it would be an essential attribute of citizens, members of this newfangled political community, to be sure that people would have the courage of their convictions and to withstand political and public pressure to not be true to themselves and to the constitutional principles.
Nadine, I'm curious. I'm not surprised that you're so familiar with their area, but how local are you? And there's a follow-up question to this.
Right now, I'm in New York. I travel all over the country constantly. I've had the pleasure of speaking in Florida more times than I can count on, I think, every campus there, law schools and undergraduates. So, and I try to follow local situation. And by the way, every place I speak, I listen to the local public radio station and make a contribution to it.
That's what I wanted to ask you about, a local situation. I've been dealing with this breaking news piece this entire hour. How familiar are you with the case of Timothy Burke, a Tampa journalist who's been charged with 14 federal crimes related to...
I'm so sorry if I have not heard of that.
Okay.
And hopefully I will. Thank you for giving me the breaking news.
Okay. Well, I will save my question because I was going to ask you. 7 of the charges have been just dismissed yesterday afternoon, and I've just been poring over this. But since you're not familiar, I'll save the question for another time.
We only got a couple more minutes left with you, Nadine. I guess we want to say, now, you were also, I saw on CBS and 60 Minutes a couple weeks ago, they re-aired a broadcast about UATX, University of Austin. That was the college that was created in part with Bari Weiss and the Free Press. You had been an advisor to UATX. And this school was designed, all talking about what you're talking about, these whole dearth of being able to talk, have free speech flow at the university system. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, and my vision, and I believe that of just about all, certainly Bari Weiss and other founders of the university, we're seeing it not in opposition to existing universities. I'll speak for myself. I'm very, very committed to existing universities and helping them to become the best that they can be, helping them to live up to their truth-seeking mission. But I also do believe that it's important to have other models and that can provide alternative strategies for pursuing those goals. So, for example, University of Austin doesn't have tenure, but it has other mechanisms for that it believes might be more effective in promoting courage and speaking out by faculty members and students, and to try to galvanize, to provide an alternative model and incentive to other universities to do the same thing. Because what University of Austin is striving to do is what every educational institution, except for those that are narrowly sectarian or military institutions, which is not to teach students what to think, but to teach them how to think, to be able to answer every question, but to question every answer, and to prepare them for effective participation in our political system.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there. Nadine Strawson, the professor emerita at New York Law School and the senior fellow at FIRE. Nadine, thank you so much for joining us here in The Skinny. We so appreciate hearing your thoughts about these important issues about the First Amendment now more than ever.
Yeah, and thank you.
Mitch and Ray, I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much, and for so effectively, influentially exercising your First Amendment rights.
I know, we're not in trouble yet.
Oh, and let's see. Okay, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I think
Go ahead.
Yeah, I saw Joe Owens. Okay, Joe Owens Schilke is ready for us.
That's right. Joe Owens Schilke is.
But Ray, we've got a minute left to go. Anything we want to say to our listeners?
We want to say, get warmed up. The fundraising show will happen October 11th. We are shooting for October 17th for another special debate between the two remaining candidates in the Tampa
And that might
City
be the same
Council.
thing where it goes on John Dingfelder's Down and Dirty
Correct.
at 10 a.m. And then 11 a.m. we may have a broader discussion about issues going on in Tampa.
That's right. We're just finalizing some guests to do that, and there'll be a news release out from the station about that. So stay tuned for that. I mean, other than that, we want to say, Joe Ellen is getting ready in Studio One, Art in Your Ear. I always know it's about to happen because the lights go down. We want to thank Anthony Madore on the phones for us, Skip Sassy on the phones. Thank you to former Florida Surgeon General Scott Rivkees for coming on at the top of the show about that. And I don't know what else to say, Mitch. You're hosting another forum.
and a couple
coming up.
Another the Tampa City Council District 5. I'll be part of one in Tampa Heights. I think that's October.
I think it's I don't want to get the date wrong, but it's in the first week of October. And thank you so much for listening to all the calls. I know we didn't get to all of them today, so we apologize for that. And thank you so much for your continued and sustaining support of WMNF Tampa. We love doing this for 3.5 years, Mitch. What is it?
2.5 years, I believe. Almost 3 years.
It feels good, and we are excited to be back here next week. Thank you, Skip Sassy, running the boards for us, and thanks to all of you guys. Have a really great weekend. Drink a lot of water. It's hot again.